One of the best things about Bully is how cliques and characters will regularly fight each other. During the game you'll randomly see fights break out for little to no reason, and on YouTube there's loads of videos pitting specific characters against each other, or clique fights, but no one has actually done a video on which clique is really the strongest. Well, at least not in an analytical sense. So for today's video that's what I'll be doing, but we need to take a look at a scenario where all the cliques will be fighting each other, and luckily we do sort of get an insight in this in Complete Mayhem. Now in Complete Mayhem, this is where Gary Smith unleashes his plans to take over Bulls Academy, and he does so by getting all the cliques to fight each other. However, thanks to Jimmy Hopkins, he manages to persuade the dropouts and the bullies, well, at the very least Russell, to not take part in the riots and realise Gary's true intentions, and the riots are stopped as Jimmy, Russell and Edgar manage to convince the leaders to stop the fighting, and they take down Gary Smith and restore law and order to Bulls Academy. Now this is the closest we get to see all the cliques take each other on in a war, minus the bullies and townies of course. However, this does raise one question: who would actually win this war? Which clique is actually the strongest? So let's take a look at a slightly hypothetical scenario where the townies and the bullies join in on this brawl. Let's just say Jimmy got picked up by his parents after getting expelled or something. Now I probably won't bring up the Complete Mayhem brawl again, but I think context is important. Also for this video I'm going to be using bully logic, as in even though there's only about 9 members in the clique, they can somehow clone themselves or respawn almost immediately after being knocked out. So that's why I'll probably mention multiple turfs and hint at characters being in multiple locations at once. Now disclaimer as usual, this video isn't meant to be serious at all, it's a light-hearted look into the cliques of Bully. So let's begin with our case for the bullies. Now when it comes to turf, the bullies only seem to occupy one bit of turf in the entirety of Bullworth, and that is the Bulls Academy parking lot, right next to the Greasers hangout, but not anybody else. The bullies are also seen around the academy grounds quite a lot, you know, like in the boys' dorm, in the school itself, but their main turf is the parking lot, that's all they occupy. Now for weaponry, the bullies only really use slingshots, which is near enough the same stuff the Greasers use. However, only Davis and Wade seem to use them, as others prefer hand-to-hand combat. But Davis and Wade do have very poor aim, rarely ever hitting their target, but in the fist-to-fist department the bullies are still fairly weak, only really being able to take down the nerds and not many others. Now the only exception to this is Russell, because he is an absolute powerhouse, but having one powerhouse alone doesn't mean victory. All of the bullies, minus Russell, are fairly weak, as none of them except Russell can really handle being shot for spud gun more than once, and the others don't really have unique fighting styles. All of the bullies just use the same fighting style, which when compared to cliques like the Jocks and the Greasers is a very bad choice. They rarely ever block and they have quite a bit of time between attacks, so they probably will get slaughtered against many other cliques. Now because of this, it's very unlikely the bullies would win at all. They're arguably the weakest clique in the game, aside from the nerds, and the bullies don't even have any of the weapons the nerds use either. As much as I don't want to show any bias in this video, I do think the bullies would be wiped out pretty quickly, by most cliques in fact. Now somebody like Russell could probably hold his own against a lot of people, against even some of the Preppy's finest like Biff Taylor and Darby Harrington even, which does put them on a more even playing field, but if Russell isn't around, they're completely screwed. Now in the game we do get a small insight into how the bullies like to set people up, and that is by intimidating somebody into chasing them where they can then jump the person. A bit like the Greasers do, but unlike the Greasers, rather than just jumping somebody all at once, they seem to only set a few people on them at a time. Now onto the Preppies, as there isn't really much to talk about with the bullies, as they really do seem to lack massively in the fighting department. When it comes down to Preppy turf, they do occupy a lot, as they have Harrington House on the academy grounds and a large majority of Old Bullworth Vale, being at the westmost part of the map, which does stop at the carnival. However, one thing most people may have missed is Harrington House is full of all kinds of weapons to be used, from plates to weed killer spray. Yep, you heard that right, the top floor of Harrington House is arguably one of the most dangerous places for this, since plants can be picked up and thrown at people, alongside a weed killer gun being used to spray any peasant they see fit. However, luckily for the peasants, it seems the Preppies are above using chemical warfare and only stick to really using eggs, bats and their fist. So they do have some honour at least, instead of resorting to spraying people's eyes out with weed killer. Now eggs are pretty much useless to damage with, and that does put the preps at a major disadvantage because eggs just do not hurt anybody. Now in fist to fist combat, the Preppies are pretty skilled with melee as they are quick on the ball to attack, coupled with knocking their opponents down quite frequently, and of course blocking, which is a very important tactic. Now much like the Jocks, they do have 2 members who can withstand spud gun shots, and they are Darby Harrington and Biff Taylor. Combined with their quick movements, these two are a force to be reckoned with. However, all the other preps are fairly weak against a spud gun, so ultimately a large majority could fall when faced against the nerds or the townies. Well, that's when they use spud gun and other throwable weapons that is. Now the Preppy's strong point seems to be unity, as they seem to hate losing to poor people, as that's what pushed Darby Harrington over the edge to fight Jimmy in Chapter 2. So maybe being beaten up by a townie or a greaser or something like that could give them that inspiration to take back some family pride or something. So In closing, I do think the preppies do stand a somewhat good chance of winning many battles, but I do not think it'll be enough to win every single battle. So let's get onto the case for their rivals, the greasers. Now the greasers arguably occupy the most turf in Bullworth, as they own the auto shop and the entirety of New Coventry, well at least during the day anyway. Now the auto shop itself isn't exactly in a good place, as it's locked in a bit, with the preppies in front of them, the jocks to their right and the bullies to their left. However, New Coventry does give them a massive advantage because it's the only place where they seem to be in complete control. Unlike Bullworth Vale, where the preppies are only really found around the beach, the gazebo and the boxing club, the greasers are pretty much all over New Coventry, and they can be found harassing residents fairly often. And if a preppy or a townie is seen anywhere in New Coventry, they will regret it. Now when it comes down to weaponry, the greasers like to use a mixture of close-up combat and ranged, with members like Lucky and Peanut sometimes using slingshots, and characters like Lefty, Vance and Norton using planks of wood. Even Johnny Vincent is known to carry weapons, as he used a pipe in his boss fight. And Johnny also arguably has one of the most powerful attacks in the entire game, with his haymaker which can floor anybody regardless of their size or whatever weapons they're holding. And of course his kick, where he can break blocks and spit on people. Hal and Norton also have a devastating bear hug attack which will damage most people. However, the other greasers mostly seem to avoid contact like that and instead rely more on quick punches and the occasional kick. Now while not weapons, the greasers are the only clique in the game shown to actually use bikes, so it would be likely that many of them would use bikes to either outrun or throw stuff at people from the bikes. Now unlike the other cliques, we do have an insight into greaser tactics, and that is them luring victims to a quiet hidden place, to jump them. Now we first see this in the mission bait, where Johnny gets Gord, Tad and Parker to the abandoned bike park. Well, he gets Jimmy to do it, but you know. And in Fighting Johnny Vincent, where we see Jimmy getting lured to the junkyard to take on all the greasers by himself. Okay, so I know Pete's there and it's never really explained why, and technically Pete doesn't fight anybody, he just presses a button, but you know, it's basically Jimmy who does all the work anyway. Anyway, back to it. So it'd be likely that the greasers would either lure a single person or a small group of people just to jump them in a hidden place in greaser territory, most likely New Coventry. Now call it what you want, but if the greasers do that, they can probably weaken the jocks or the townies by luring their strongest to take on all of them, either giving themselves an advantage, and even in the playing field for the other cliques. Well, at least until that specific clique member respawns, that is. Now much like the preppies, the greasers do seem to have a great chance of winning many battles, but could they take on every single clique? Well, let's get on to the case of the nerds to find that out. Now the nerds occupy 3 bits of turf in Bullworth: the library, the observatory and the comic book store. The library is arguably the safest turf for surprise attacks, as they'd only have to worry about the wall on the right hand side, which admittedly preppies could ambush at any given time. But aside from this, the nerds wouldn't have to worry about surprise attacks from any other cliques. Now if the nerds were to lose the library, they'd have 2 choices: either retreat back to the observatory and become completely surrounded by jocks and whatever clique took over the library, or retreat back to the comic book store and risk losing the observatory too, and the spud cannon would become property of whatever clique conquers that turf. Now the nerds arguably have the most available weaponry from every single clique in the game, with yardsticks, spud guns, bottle rocket launchers, stink bombs and firecrackers all at the ready, and many of the nerds do carry these weapons on them at all times. Now the only nerds who do not carry any kind of projectile weapons are Fan and Cornelius, who prefer yardstick combat. You could also group Ernest into this, as he doesn't use any weapons at all if mobbed in free mode, but it's hardly likely he'd be stationed on the spud cannon somewhere. Well, what do I mean by somewhere? You know what I mean, the observatory. However, in unarmed combat, the nerds would always be heavily outnumbered, and coupling that together with their already god-awful combat skills, it'd most likely prove not to be a challenge for any clique. However, the nerds will almost certainly outnumber cliques in ranged combat, as they actually do have a good chance of winning, but once again this does depend what weapons they use. Like if the nerds use spud guns and firecrackers, they could make short work of anybody, but if they use stink bombs and bottle rockets, they might not stand much of a chance. And the reason I say they might not stand much of a chance if they use bottle rockets is because, well, you know, the bottle rockets, they seem to bounce up and down the place, they're not entirely accurate and all that, and they seem to stun people more than knock them out. Now the spud cannon on the other hand cannot actually be used unless an attack on the observatory happened, which is definitely a downside, but we have actually seen this in action in the mission Defender of the Castle, where Ernest has Jimmy on the spud cannon defending the observatory from the jock invasion. So we have seen how lethal the spud cannon can be, but the downside to this once again is whatever weapons the nerds use, ammo is always limited. It might be enough to take down most of the bullies, but it definitely will not be enough to take down all of the jocks, as some of them can handle being shot with a spud gun more than once, and this could show another nerd defeat, especially against the likes of Damon and Ted, who can actually withstand multiple spud gun shots. We also do see a bit of an insight into how the nerds prepare for combat, as Ernest seems to actually lay out his plans rather than mindlessly attack, and he seems to be a very strategic leader in that regard. Like how in the nerds hideout we can actually see plans for the nerds stealing the mascot outfit for the big game. Now this does put them at a slight advantage, as they do tend to use brains over brawn, which is definitely their strong suit. But what plans could Ernest actually come up with to take down the other cliques? Going off what we learnt in the game, it took months of preparation to take down the JOCKS to begin with, and in the event of an actual riot, or war in this case, there wouldn't be much time to come up with plans as great as that. And as we do see in the story, the nerds actually do manage to defeat the JOCKS, so I wouldn't rule them out as just losing completely outright. But as said above, without a well crafted plan, they certainly do not have much chance because of their lack of any actual combat skills. Turf-wise, the JOCKS have the worst possible turf in the game. They are completely surrounded. To the left are the greasers, to the right are the preppies, and next to the football field are the nerds. Well, the observatory anyway, which has a spud cannon. The JOCKS do not have any other turf or anywhere else to turn to, so should their turf become completely overrun, that's it for them. That's also not counting the Harrington House path to the gym where the preppies could pelt the JOCKS with eggs from the rooftops. Now weapon wise, the JOCKS do not use any ranged weapons, or any other weapons to be honest other than a baseball bat. The JOCKS attacks are strongly close quarter, and this would put them at a major advantage in numbers in close quarter combat, as they'd be able to vastly outnumber all of the other cliques, as many members from other cliques do use ranged weapons. Combined with their strength, the JOCKS would be incredibly powerful, especially with people like Damon West, who would make very quick work out of people like Gord, Lefty, all of the nerds etc. Now other smaller characters like Dan and Kirby probably won't last too long by themselves however, but as said, in a massive group, which is pretty much every single jock, they would prove to be a massive challenge for anybody. And there are also a few JOCKS that can actually withstand being shot with a spud gun more than once too, these being Damon West, Luis Luna, Ted Thompson and Yuri Karazimov. I hope I pronounced that right. Okay, granted, Yuri and Luis will be severely weakened, a bit like Hal and Norton from the Greasers. The JOCKS do stand quite a high chance of winning, but only in close quarter combat, as against townies who use firecrackers or nerds who use spud guns could result in a JOCK defeat, or a very heavy casualty, but that doesn't mean they'd be likely to lose at all. I think the driving force behind a JOCK victory would almost certainly be Damon and Ted. Now when it comes down to turf, the townies occupy Blue Skies Industrial Park, the power plant and the alleyways in Bulworth Town, but at night time they also occupy the entirety of New Coventry, meaning they practically occupy the entirety of the east of Bulworth, which does give them a massive advantage. It's like a slow townie invasion from the east. Now this does put them at a rather massive advantage, as they're not really surrounded by anybody. You could argue they're surrounded by greasers during the day, but they do have a path to get into the academy if they ever need it, and the paths they could take would either lead them to the Bullies car park or the Nerds Observatory. Now both cliques would get taken down pretty damn easily by the dropouts. Now the townies seem to be a fan of anarchy, so it wouldn't be surprising if they just joined the brawl for the sake of it, as they do seem to be the kind of clique who don't want a reason to get into a fight. Also, the townies are arguably the most unpopular clique in the entire game. None of the cliques seem to like them, so it wouldn't be surprising if in combat other cliques set aside their differences to deal with the dropouts. The Greasers despise them for putting Johnny Vincent in a mental asylum, the Preppies probably hate them just for being poor, regardless of not believing Jimmy's pictures, and I'd assume there's some bad blood with other cliques, as if you take a dropout to any turf in the academy, you know, jocks or nerds who the townies don't actually deal with inside the story. Well, I mean they do, you know, like rats in the library and of course setting the gym on fire, but as far as I'm aware, in the story, the nerds and the jocks don't actually know. But either way, for some reason, the townies will get attacked on sight. Now the townies aren't lacking in the combat area either. Their weaponry consists of firecrackers, bricks and planks of wood, and if that isn't dangerous enough, they also have the most powerful melee attacks in the entire game, and seem to attack much faster than most of the factions, making them the most aggressive clique around. But I do think when in numbers, and dealing with arm-to-arm fighting, the dropouts are quite a threat, a bit like the jocks. I'd say they're probably the only clique that can truly rival the jocks in that department. They would be able to make pretty quick work of the nerds and the bullies, and I'd assume they'd be able to handle the preps and the greasers without much hassle too. Now we do actually get a slight hint of what the townies are capable of in Chapter 5, and that is the most criminal stuff in the entire game, sabotaging deliveries and arson to name some. I mean, if you think of it, in the mission the gym is burning, Kirby, Mandy and Yuri nearly died because of Gurney committing arson. So make of that what you will, the townies are without a doubt a real force to be reckoned with in this game. So now for the final thoughts, who do I think would win the war for the academy? Well, I think it would be a very close tie between the jocks and the townies. Now this is mostly due to how powerful both these cliques really are. The other four cliques don't seem to really stand much of a chance against them, with the jocks being able to pretty much swarm people and the dropouts having incredibly powerful and aggressive attacks. Now I feel the townies would win overall because of what they're capable of, sabotaging, arson and getting other people incarcerated. and how they somehow managed to cripple cliques in the 5th chapter of Bully without even laying a finger on anybody. Now the nerds and the bullies wouldn't stand much of a chance in my opinion. The nerds would get destroyed in close quarter combat, and they'd probably run out of ammo at some point. And the bullies don't really have anything to give them an edge in combat, aside from Russell, which when he falls it's pretty much game over for them. Now I would say that the preppies and greasers are quite evenly matched, as half the fights I see between them end in a prep win and the other half a greaser wins. So if I had to tier them from lowest to highest, bullies, nerds, preppies, greasers, jocks, and then townies. Now bullies come last because, as I've said, they don't really actually have anything to give them a chance in combat. They only really have Russell, which, as I've mentioned God knows how many times in this video, once he falls, they're all screwed. Now the nerds, while physically weaker, they do actually have some powerful weapons which they would definitely use, but they're absolute garbage in combat, and they would get destroyed pretty quickly, especially when their ammo runs out. Now the preppies and greasers are very evenly matched, I'd say. It's very hard to say which group is actually stronger, as often when I see them fighting in the game it's usually a very even match, unless of course you put somebody like Biff Taylor against Vance. Now I guess Darby Harrington and Biff Taylor could make a damn powerful team, but the greasers do have some dirty tactics which do put them at an advantage, so it is a very hard choice there, I'd say. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more bully content. Let me know if you agree with me, and if you don't, please explain why instead of just saying nerds rule or whatever. So yeah, hope you enjoyed today's video. If you want to support me in a more personal way, become a member of my channel. So thank you for watching and have a great day.